In a book titled Beyond Worthy, American author Jacqueline Whitney once said, quote,
You are always stronger than you feel. You are always more capable than you feel. You are always more loved than you feel. You are always less annoying than you feel.
Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chasing the Dream. I'm your host, Lily Rain. I'm a college student, content creator, model, artist, creative based out of San Diego. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome featuring a special guest, my friend Alejandro. We met at an internship 2 years ago, and we've been besties ever since. And I just thought that this conversation is something we've kind of had looming in our minds for a while, and I just really wanted to share this on my space. So, Alejandro, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lily. Hello, hello, hello. Before anything, I just wanna say thank you for having me here, hosting me, and for giving me a space and an opportunity to collaborate on a passion project of yours. Like Lily introduced me, I'm Alejandro. I'm a Puerto Rican scholar in formation here based off of Puerto Rico. I study history in the University of Puerto Rico. What else can I say? I like cats. I like history. I'm a big nerd, and I'm working currently on a transfer application for a university based in the US so I can finish my degree and hopefully move on to graduate studies there.
Before we start talking about imposter syndrome, I just wanted to define it for everybody. So, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which individuals, despite achieving lots of success and recognition in their pursuits, still harbor feelings of inadequacy and self doubt. One common fear is the fear of being exposed as a fraud or that accomplishments do not stem from hard work but rather from luck. It is not only felt by undergraduate students, but by graduate students, research fellows, professors. Due to how rigorous and gatekept the world of higher education is, this is a common feeling amongst scholars. For the second part, we're going to be talking about our personal experiences alongside these definitions that I just provided, and we're going to be starting off with Alejandro's village and origin story and then getting into mine. So, start us off.
I first of all, I think it's really prudent to start off this conversation with the last part of the definition that Lily gave us about imposter syndrome in academia. For me, it's a feeling that's really hard to shake off. I'm just about to start my fourth year, and I've been on several internships. My first of which that was the one that I met Lily, and for me, imposter syndrome has a little different seasoning compared to what other people might feel because I come from Puerto Rico. For those who don't know, Puerto Rico is one of the last and it's the oldest colony that is still uh, uh, functioning. In 1898, we became a possession of the United States, and ever since then, we've been more or less controlled over by them. Most of our decisions, like government decisions, are overseen by Congress, and if Congress doesn't like something, they can just veto, and we need to do whatever they say. This relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States kind of leads or feeds into this imposter syndrome that I feel because uh, it's had a lasting cultural impact on amongst Puerto Ricans. For example, everybody can say this. Well, not everybody, but like older generations can testify to this. Those that were fortunate enough to be able to go to school in the geography classes and history classes. They it was an all-American curriculum at first, during the first 30, 40 years of American colonial rule in Puerto Rico, and we were taught and raised that Puerto Rico is this really small island in the Caribbean. We don't have enough. We don't have resources. We're just an island with people, and that kind of sucked because from the get go, from elementary school, you're telling we're just this tiny insignificant island, and and people were raised with that thought, and that thought got passed to younger generations and newer generations, and this persisted in various levels through the 20th century. At first, we had this type of education and school of thought, and then as Puerto Rico got more industrialized throughout the second half of the 20th century, you have a generation of Puerto Ricans that were unable to go to school, and now they're able to at least afford to have their children or their grandchildren go to school. And then you have this mentality of, okay, if you're gonna study to work for the Americans, for an American company, because in Puerto Rico there's a lot of American companies that operate in the island, a lot of store chains like Walmart and Sam's Club, Costco, fast food joints. You have Burger King, McDonald's, KFC, uh, Chipotle, stuff like that. Car dealerships, you have Ford, Chevrolet. In the manufacturing scene, you have a lot of like pharmaceuticals. We used to have petrochemicals, and so you were raised like, yeah, work for the Americans, or even better, work so you can study and work abroad, so you can stay there, because Puerto Rico is there's not a lot of opportunities here, and I was kind of raised in that type of household. There's a bunch of things that I'm gonna get later on with in this conversation, but in Puerto Rico, there's only one public university system. It's called UPR, University of Puerto Rico. I study in the Maya West campus. There are 11 campuses, but there's only three, four big campuses. The rest are just smaller schools that have like different specializations depending on the geographical part of the island in the island. My dad was he studied his bachelor's and master's in UPRM in the Maya West campus of the UPR system, and he was raised in what I would call the golden age of the Puerto Rican economy. This is the point where Puerto Rico is like fully industrialized. There's some economic recessions and stuff that are happening in the background, but overall, like Puerto Rico is industrializing, it's urbanizing, uh, the GDP is stronger than ever, local income is like the average income is higher than ever, and he left in the 90s to in the late 90s, early 2000s to finish his doctorate degree to study and he did it in the United States, and he left with an image of a Puerto Rico that was in progress. It was progressing, and he thought that when he came back to Puerto Rico, things would get even better. And so my parents met in the States, and they had me in the States. I was born in Michigan, and 3 years I was born in 2002. 3 years later, in 2005, we moved back because my father got a job as a professor in the Maya West campus. And when he came back, things were different. Maya West, one of the towns that I was raised in, a lot of local stores had shut down. There were a lot of abandoned buildings. There was trash everywhere. The UPR system was going through the start of many financial crisis, and my dad was like caught really off guard by this. And he was honestly, I think he was really disappointed because he expected something else. While I was growing up, I just kept hearing my dad say, "Oh, the university every year. I think it can't get any worse. We just hit right bottom. The next academic year starts. Oh, it's worse." And I've studied in the system for the last 3 years. These last 3 years have been the worst for the university system. It also coincided with the crisis that the pandemic created, but there was a lot of student and worker strikes, a lot of budget cuts, and like there's a lot of budget constraints. And the reason why there's a lot of budget constraints because in the late 90s, Puerto Rico's first of all, let me head back a little bit. The reason why Puerto Rico managed to industrialize so quick in the last 50 years was because of this economic incentives program called Operation Bootstrap, and later on in the 70s, it got transformed into Section 936. These were a bunch of tax breaks that allowed American companies to come to Puerto Rico and basically produce their goods tax free. In the 90s, Bill Clinton and the Puerto Rican governor at the time, Pedro Rosselló, signed a law that effectively ended Section 936 from the 1990s to 2005, 2006. That will be a transitional period for that was supposed to allow the Puerto Rican government to adjust its economy to a post 936 Section 936 world, and it failed to do so. And we just started giving bonds. In the 2008 recession hit us really hard, and then in 2015 our economy collapsed. And during the last term of the last year of the Obama administration, he signed a law called the Promesa Act, or the Promesa Law, which assigned the Fiscal Administration Board to oversee how the Puerto Rican government goes over its government expenditure. One of the things that this Fiscal Administration Board, that we call the Junta, uh, started defunding was University of Puerto Rico. Things have gotten to the point where our library shuts down every so often because they don't have air conditioning and they have to fix the air conditioning. We used to have 3 computer centers. All of them have shut down. We used to have printing services in the student center, and most department buildings, most of them have shut down. And in some of the functioning printing services, we have to bring our own paper because we don't have paper in those offices don't have paper for us. Salaries have been slashed in half, or in the case of the professors, they haven't been raised in over a decade. If I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of controversies regarding the pensions for professors and other staff, which when the university was created, they were supposed to be left untouched because they were like, I don't know the exact details behind those pensions, but I know that they were different to, for example, police pensions or other government officials. The government or Congress couldn't touch that money at all. And I think what happened is either they started taking money away from that pool, or they forced the university to change the pension system for professors and other important workers within the UPR system that originally benefited from that. And from a certain period forward, newly contracted staff members, faculty members will be assigned a normal like pension, government pension. Took one of the few things that made working for the UPR system attractive. And in my case, the humanities department, social sciences department, a lot of our professors are really old, and they're either retiring or they're dying, uh, and they're not contracting new professors, and they're having to bring professors from Rio Piedras, which is the humanities-centered campus, because my campus is more towards engineering and STEM. They can give so many courses without that conflicting with their own academic responsibilities in their own campus. So history courses are really hard to get in my campus, and that's what's been propelling me to go on and finish my degree somewhere else. One of the things that I started like doing was, okay, so if I want to transfer, I've got to have a good CV. So I started applying for internships, and the first internship that I landed was the Humanities Collaboratory, Johns Hopkins University. That's where I met Lily. Honestly, it was a really scary experience for me internally, because even though I enjoyed my time there to the fullest and I met wonderful people there was still always like this little like bug in my ear. It was like biting and bothering me because I went to this university, to a historically white space. I'm a Latino. I'm not that white to begin with. So, and I have an accent when I speak, and I was really scared because as an outsider, I grew up with chronically online, and I was always hearing stories about racism in the United States, police brutality in the United States, school shootings, and like hate crimes and stuff like that. That honestly scared the living shit out of me. Being there, like I felt like this pressure to overperform, to so I could impress, and like through the entire 2 months, I was like, damn, I gotta do a really good job, because if I don't, like, if not, they're just gonna think I'm just gonna feed into stereotypes. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. I did a project on Puerto Rican cultural affairs regarding Christmas music and the development of salsa, which by itself it's a whole cultural and political movement born in the States by the Puerto Rican and to an extent the broader Latin American diaspora. I felt really out of place because a lot of projects were centered being raised in a semi-American systems like the golden standard, which is like Eurocentric and Oriental affairs. And it felt really weird having a project on what I call Latinidad, my Latin American roots, and then having to present that in like a national setting at the end of the internship. I was like, damn, like, am I really doing a good enough job that it deserves to be presented in these national conferences? I mean, at the end, I did it. I finished the program along with my other peers. I got a diploma for it. One of our mentors and one of the heads of the program gave me the diploma, and they congratulated me for my work. And they told me, if you need anything, let us know. Like, even though I got that level of assurance and reassurance, when I was heading back to Puerto Rico, I was like, did I really do this? Did I really did a good enough job? Then the following year, I applied for another internship to the University of Chicago, and that was even scarier because it's a more elite school, and I heard a lot of horror stories from there. Again, this whole shabab of like, oh, am I really worth it? Like, I got in, which okay, but am I really worth it? Am I really gonna survive this? And that internship was more intense. I had to produce, apart from my research and my presentations, I had to produce a minimum of 15 pages for an academic paper. We were assigned specific faculty members from the university itself to oversee our work. That was really scary because you have like world-renowned professors overseeing and critiquing your work, and again, you just have that pressure to overperform and excel and exceed expectations because you don't want to feed into stereotypes. For me, it's all about stereotypes because I was growing up. I read. I saw news, and I've been on social media for most of my life, and there's a lot of like bigotry and ignorance prevalent in all platforms. So like I didn't want to feed into that shit. It was really scary because if you feel like you're invading a space that not meant to be in, it also like makes me feel kind of sad about it because you know I'm working this hard, and at the end of the day, like I'm working. I don't want to do this, like, but I'm actively working on leaving Puerto Rico so I can finish my studies. Like I'm actively working to leave a setting so I can go to another setting that actively feeds into my imposter syndrome, because even though back to back I've managed to prove to myself I'm worthy of participating and doing good in these internships and stuff like that, and I've excelled in these settings, there's still like this doubt that never really leaves you. I know we're gonna talk about this later on, but I think it's prudent to say this like right off the bat and keep it present when we go into further on to our discussion. But it's really important for us I feel, to have support networks, whether it be at home with your friends or even within their own internships. Like try to find people that you click with, and because I'm speaking from a point of view of internships right now. Those 2 months. You're 2, at least for me, it's 2 months in a different country, academic setting, a different environment, and being surrounded with people that are supportive, and that have belonged all of their lives in that system. Having them reassure you like, hey, this is gonna work out. That's really cool and really helpful, and that's what mostly got me through these research internship experiences. If I manage to transfer, it will probably. I'm hopefully that it will also help me get through my studies.
You will manage to transfer. And I wanted to ask, while you're at the internship, did you have professors and your family back home cheering you on and trying to combat these feelings of self-doubt? Did you voice, what was going through your head while you were at the internship, or did you kind of just keep quiet about it or talk to friends?
And in the internships and at home, I was really vocal about my experiences, my fears, my insecurities, and they were really supportive. In the case of family, however, especially those that have gone through higher education, it was a bag of mixed feelings because at some points they were really supportive and they were really encouraging, but then when I shared my work and I asked for feedback before I submitted that to other like to to the mentors and professors at campus, they were sometimes really abrasive and dismissive of my work. They were questioning, was it really worth it? Like, first, I have one family member go like, "Yeah, this is complete dog shit. You should redo this because you shouldn't send this to your professor. Uh, if you're gonna present this, I'll say, like, they were like, yeah, scrap this and do something else. Like, I don't see this as something that could be, like that could flourish in academia because it's something that's super niche to us. I'm like, it's a passion project, and I want to use these internship opportunities to not only conduct research but conduct research on things that I'm passionate about, and that really hurt me because that comment came like when we started. I was in Hopkins, and that comment came when we were starting to get ready to practice for the presentations for lands, and that kind of demoralized me and destroyed me a bit for a couple of days because we're at the eve of presenting at national conferences, and I got hit with a, yeah, this is complete dog shit. Don't present this. Redo your entire project in
I
10
had that
days.
same issue. I shared my presentation with a professor back home who had more knowledge of the subject than any of our mentors did at the program. And I think a week before we presented at the national conference lands here in the States, he told me to redo it, that I should scrap half the presentation. He didn't like the visuals to make it even worse. And I remember getting off the Zoom call and bawling my eyes out. And after we presented and he came to the live Zoom call, I just got a text that said, we'll talk about this after. And we have not spoken since. And I had so much love from everybody else from my presentation about a relief in ancient Persepolis. That one comment stuck with me, and I did not feel like a scholar that was deserving of this internship strictly because of the way that he viewed my project. Now, I'll get into why his view was very harsh because of the level that the internship was at, but having that overwhelming doom and just even one comment could surpass all these positive energy that you have from everybody else in the room who loves what you do. And I want to say we all loved Alejandro's project so much, and I didn't know you had a family member that was dragging you down like that because you're so well spoken and you're so excited. And I think compared to everybody else, you're the most knowledgeable just from your prior knowledge than any of anyone else in the internship had. Ours were pretty heavy research based, but you had so much passion and love that just stemmed from your heart along with research. And you could just listen to Alejandro talk for hours about his project, just have a smile on your face because when you're excited, you get us excited. And it was just beautiful to, see you want to bring to light this Puerto Rican history to the States where we tend to undermine what you guys have gone through.
Yeah, I mean, like a little side note related to that, like my research that I've done has focused almost entirely on the development of the salsa genre of music and the social cultural impact that it's had on Latin America, but mostly in Puerto Rico because that's where I'm from, and I have really personal ties to the movement itself. My maternal grandfather had his own band, and he kept correspondence with a lot of the big players in the movement. I feel like I'm doing justice to the activism of these artists, these songwriters, these musicians, these singers, because salsa stems from a population that in the States was marginalized, was unheard. It was being stepped on, and they took it upon their own hands and their own instruments to say, our culture is actually valid. And as a person who, and I'll shamefully admit this, throughout most of my early childhood up until like my late teen years, as a person who actively like shunned Puerto Rican culture as something as rowdy, uncivilized, like was just I thought really negatively about Puerto Rican culture. I thought it was like really loud, rowdy, and to some extent uncivilized, which is crazy because that's literally my culture and my own history, and I just like, yeah, let me consume the American, what I thought was the American way of life and American culture, and be an American citizen. And it wasn't during the pandemic that I started to reflect, because I'm a historian. I was like, damn, I know so little about Puerto Rican history. One of the instruments that I used to connect with that was music, salsa specifically, and that's like a rabbit hole because salsa connects you with Cuba, it connects you with Africa, because there's a lot of Afro-Cuban and then later on Afro-Puerto Rican forms of music that get mixed into the genre. And those genres, in the case of Puerto Rico, they're intimately tied to our folklore, our culture, our history. And by studying this music, I'm in the same way studying Puerto Rican history, and in doing so, I'm giving a new voice. I'm amplifying these other voices from the past and presenting them into a modern, contemporary academic setting. If it weren't from that realization that I had in 11th grade, 12th grade, before I graduated high school, I probably wouldn't be the scholar that I am today. I'm proud to say it. I'll be continuing my work, my research on Puerto Rican history through the analytical lens of Puerto Rican music.
I'm going to touch into my experience at community college, internship, San Diego State, and the future. So I started off at junior college, which is looked down upon in the States just because when you're going out of high school with college applications, the primary goal is to get to a 4 year. And then junior college is everybody's safety backup option if they don't get into their dream school. Because I was an undeclared major, I was kind of going in as a design major, but I wasn't 100% sure. I graduated high school early in order to go to college. I was very, very eager to figure out what my path was in life. So when I was at junior college, I already had this feeling of inadequacy, despite being smart, despite having a 4.0, despite making Dean's List in high school. Being in junior college with these stereotypes associated with it was already a little bit difficult. And not to mention, when I did officially declare my major as art history, I was the only art history major, which was kind of strange. My college was that small, and for a while, I didn't have anybody to look up to. I didn't know how this was applicable to the real world until I met a really sweet professor who ended up overseeing a paper that I published very recently. She was a Latino studying art history. She studied at UCLA, not to mention. She came from a community college, transferred to UCLA, and that gave me so much hope because you do not see people of color studying art history. It is a very white run museum mess. And, to meet her and to have all my questions answered of what was your experience like transferring UCLA, applying to jobs in museums, applying for research positions. It made my heart so warm and it gave me a lot of hope as to what I could do with my major, that I could be successful as a Latina in this space because I've only ever seen white people successful as art historians, even as women. There are mostly male art historians back in the past. Now it's a little bit more female dominated. But even in the past, the female historians and researchers that were really big were all white. Towards the end of my time in junior college, my modern art professor threw this internship opportunity out at our class. And then I went up to him and I asked him a couple more details about it. And he really encouraged me to apply, despite I was like, oh, I don't know, this seems cool, but I feel like it's such a long shot. And he told me, just go for it. I really like your work in this class. I think that this could be really big, especially for our history department, to have you represent our tiny college out on the East Coast at a top 10 university. That would be really cool. I'm down to write you a letter of rec. So I applied to Johns Hopkins. I didn't think much of it. I had a Zoom interview, and slowly the acceptance comes in. I mean, I packed my things. I was just happy that I got to have a little escape from my hometown and experience something different because it was so redundant being at a community college that was underfunded. And, I studied in a building that was supposed to be demolished prior to COVID, and to this day, it looks really sad. It has boarded up windows, and I just didn't have much hope going through university because I was like, is this really how it is? Is this the way that our historians are treated? So that's why I had a really hard time in college, especially. But after getting to Hopkins, settling in, I had a wonderful roommate and a little group of friends that I slowly built up. Every day we had this 9 to 5 structure. We would come in, they'd kind of show us a PowerPoint lecture. We'd have a discussion, take a little break. We'd come back, continue the discussion. Maybe we'd have a guest, and then we'd have our lunch and work on our projects, or continue discussion, start research towards the beginning of the internship. When we did these discussions, I cannot even begin to explain how out of place I felt in this space, despite being interviewed, despite writing these long essays and getting letters of rec to get in the program, being vetted by the person who founded the Humanities Collaboratory. I still did not feel smart enough to be in this space because it was just a lot to take in. To be at a top 10, to have been flown out here, to be given all this money, I didn't think anything that I had to say was important and valuable towards the conversation. So I think slowly as time went on, I gained a little bit more courage to speak up and to explain exactly what I was thinking. Then we ended up presenting at LANS towards the end of the program, which is the Leadership Alliance of
Leadership Alliance National Symposium.
It's been a while. Okay. And then after we came up with our projects, we wrote them, we presented them to each other. Then we presented at LANS, which, I mean, we touched on LANS earlier, but it is the Leadership Alliance National Symposium it was based out of Connecticut that year. So only people from the top tens were able to present at this conference. And then we ranked just number 10, the Hopkins University. And I just want to say, I don't know about you, Alejandro, but being there, it did not feel real because we were in this really fancy hotel. I don't know if you guys have seen the Hunger Games, but it looked like the Capitol every time we would go and eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, even going in these presentation halls. We're like, wow, there's this beautiful podium and this screen behind you. It made you feel so important, but for what reason? Were we really deserving of this coming from community colleges, coming from underfunded places with not lots of opportunity? But after being there and meeting other people, I did start to feel a little bit more worthy of it. And then at the goodbye dinner, when we were given the certificates and we kind of had this little closing ceremony where we all reflected on the program, mostly things that went good, but I think amongst our groups, we talk about things that went wrong and, what we're going to take from this internship moving forward. I still couldn't fathom that this all happened and that this was real. I produced this presentation, I produced this paper, I present it at a national conference that a very select number of people are invited to. And then I present it at Hopkins symposium that we had once we came back from LANS. Putting it on my resume did not feel real. And to even tell people, yeah, very casually, I studied at the Johns Hopkins, or saying it under my breath, yeah, I did this internship on the East Coast. You did an internship where? Telling that to people was crazy at first, but then as time went on, I was able to reassure myself that I got this opportunity because I was ready, because I was capable, because the director saw potential in my work and my light and the research that I was going to bring to this wonderful program.
I felt that, and especially with Chicago, because I thought Hopkins, like, okay, maybe that was just a fluke, maybe it's just a one time thing. And then when I got back, when I got like back to back, Hopkins then Chicago, it was like, yo, is this real? And Chicago, like I didn't mention this earlier, but Chicago was even more surreal. So for Hopkins, at least the year that we studied there, we were 30 something, almost 30 something humanities student in one program.
Mm-hmm.
For the Leadership Alliance in Chicago, it was just 30 students, but only 6 of us were humanities and social sciences. The rest were in STEM. And I remember that on the closing ceremony for the program, they recommended me for a certificate. And it felt really weird and out of place because here I am, a Latino person of color in a white space, studying humanities, something in the humanities and social sciences, in a room full of STEM people. And out of all the STEM people in the program, and out of the bunch, our little multi crew of humanities majors, I was the only person in the entire program that got recommended and selected for this extra award, apart from the completion certificate for the program. And like to this day, like at least for me, it's still hard to accept that. Like, and I have it, and I look at it from time to time. Like, is this real? Like, am I hallucinating? Coming from from an underfunded university, from a colony, in a place where you're taught from the beginning, yeah, there's no opportunities here. Go study abroad and leave. Don't come back. Like coming from that type of place and then being there in those internships and performing really well and getting these recognitions, that's crazy.
And also coming from a place where you're encouraged to leave, like this is just the midway point as a gateway to something better. You're always wondering, you have this looming feeling of, well, what is better? And then when you finally get the opportunity that's better to go to Hopkins, to go to U Chicago, to go to grad school, whatnot, it is really hard to grasp onto the acceptance being there. I'm I think you also had this feeling throughout the program. The whole time we were there, we just had a hard time, I guess, conceptualizing it that we were all there together, that we were all humanities people, that even though most research funding goes towards STEM, we were chosen as people in the humanities to represent our community colleges, to represent our 4 years, and to be there was kind of a lot to take in, but it was fun. And eventually, I think we all kind of got to that point to where we were proud of our research, we were proud of what we were representing. And on that Zoom call, when our professors, our families were there, it was this beautiful moment that I think we were all able to bond over with our success. And like, we did complete this. I mean, it's still a lot to take in, but we all did this in a group. We all encouraged each other. We all made friends, and that the humanities is worth studying and that there's so much more we have to offer this world. And, despite all the stereotypes that come with studying it, we're proud to do it. And there is a reason to study it because life would be nothing with just STEM. Creativity and the arts and entertainment is what gives people light and what gives them hope. Because if all the diseases and all the problems were solved, what would we have left? We would have the creatives who produce these beautiful writings, music, art. That's what makes life so fulfilling and enriching at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Post community college, my dream transfer was a CSU, specifically San Diego State. I got into three, but I was hoping to get into this fourth one. And when I got it, it was such a beautiful opportunity. And I was just excited to have something to grasp onto that was more than what I came from, because coming from a community college where I was only our history major, the buildings were boarded up. The professors, max had master's degrees. I did not know an art historian with a PhD personally until I got to San Diego State, where most of these professors are tenured. They've gone through their PhD. They've gone to top tens. They've gone to these amazing public universities all across the US, all across the world. They've studied abroad. Their knowledge is so rich and interesting to listen to. And it gave a new light, especially in these lecture halls, taking notes. You could ask them anything and they know the answers to the questions. They are real life examples of art history and how it's applicable to the real world. And just ask them questions about, how they got to where they're at, their experience as undergrads. I just loved being associated with San Diego State. However, the part that I didn't like being associated with it as a new member of the upper division department as a transfer, these classes are integrated. It's not just undergrads, but it's also master's and PhD students. So when we're reviewing some kind of art history concept or talking about the history, some kind of timeline, and the professors ask us for input, what we think, I am so used to sitting in the front of the class because I was the only art history major in community college. I was eager to speak and to participate in everything. I started to sit closer to the back and not want to be involved because I didn't feel worthy being at San Diego State, despite how hard I worked to get into school. I didn't feel worthy of this acceptance as time went on. And it took a while to fully take in the fact that I did deserve to be at this university because for the first semester, it was so rough because the midterms were different. The structure of the classes was not set up the way it was in community college. So it definitely was an adjustment. And, I remember getting my first midterm back and, thinking I studied correctly, thinking I allotted enough time to study, I got a D on my first midterm. And then I barely got a C on my second one. And I was losing hope. I was scared. I was like, do I really belong here? Despite having good grades and transferring over and having these letters of rec and having people tell me that this is a place you belong. You belong at a university with more resources to study art history because you're deserving of this. I did not feel deserving of it because of what was going on paper. Despite how passionate it was, despite how excited I was, it still didn't feel right. Even though I wanted this, it was still kind of a mental block for a while. But once I accepted that I'm worthy of this, I'm capable of this, I wouldn't have been given this opportunity if I wasn't ready. That's when everything started to soak in. I developed different study techniques. When you're at a higher level school, there's a different way to approach exams, to approach essays, to approach even talking to professors because you're a number now. It's not as personal, but it's just because of the different measure of students and whatnot at the university. In the last part of the podcast, we're going to be talking about how to cope with imposter syndrome, specifically as an academic, and what we have learned since doing these great internships, since transferring, and just our opportunities in general. The first thing I'd say is to seek support from mentors and peers that look like you, and especially with mental health professionals. University is difficult, it is brutal, but it is so important to get help when you need it. I wish I seek therapy a lot earlier in university, but I'm glad, I've seeked at some point because you definitely cannot do this alone. You need to talk things out, you need to journal, you need to have your feelings affirmed by someone, and if you need medication, to go and get it and to not be in denial about things that you're going through, or even to have your experiences undermined by people in your space, like whether it's your household, your friends. You're feeling that way for a reason, and not all of us have the same brain. There are receptors that are naturally open for some people, and they can intake so much more serotonin and produce it, but some of us, those receptors are closed or they're like barely open, and we just need a little bit of help so that we can be on the same level as everybody else, so it can be a level playing field. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. I just want to emphasize that. And it's important to not only to get help, but to have reassurance, to have a group of people, and to just have that support.
Like in a day and age where mental health is so stigmatized and psychiatric help is very stigmatized, like it's, as a person who like actively like seeks therapy, it's a really essential tool that we can use as not only as scholars, but as just general, like normal everyday people, to like get through our on a day-to-day basis and address any issues that we have with ourselves, or we perceive with ourselves. I think it's also really beneficial, and in my case, as a really social person, it's crucial for me to have and build a support group based off people, friends, acquaintances, either understand you, relate to you in some capacity, or straight up are going through the same problems that you're facing, or issues that you think you're facing but you're actually not. In the case of academia, we are worthy of the academic opportunities that we've gone through, the ones that we're gonna get in the future. We're worthy of studying in the places that we're studying. We're capable of producing the work that we produce. There's always that lingering feeling that, oh yeah, this is shit. Yeah,
There's a
I don't
devil
think
on
I'm.
your shoulder.
Yeah, it's really important to have people reassure you and give you that extra impulse to, keep going in a way, try to steer you away from thinking in a certain manner, changing
Having
your
that
way of
sense of
thought.
community helps enforce that we all do feel this. It's a common experience, but we need to foster, a safe space where we can talk about this. Because I remember at the internship specifically, we did have conversations surrounding imposter syndrome, but it wasn't like a table group discussion necessarily. It was just, hey guys, here's how you overcome it. We need to address this because it's kind of mandatory. And then we'd kind of go back to our apartments and like briefly discuss it. But I genuinely thought I was the only one at the program who did not feel worthy of being there because of what I had to bring to the table discussion wise, because everybody had so much more to say. And I felt like because I'm not as well read as some people, I just thought that the way that I spoke in was very dumbed down. And, why am I here with people who are like scholars and I'm just, oh, someone who's studying humanities?
Yeah, in my case, I felt really similar to you, but in my case, it was more like, oh, I have a lot to bring to the table, but I don't know if people are gonna vibe with it because racism and stuff. And also, like, I thought that my way, and actually, this came across this actually was way more prevalent in Chicago. I thought that my way of expressing myself and interacting, like talking and conveying information, I do so in a what I perceived as a too colloquial manner, because I was surrounded with people that used really big fancy words that half of the time I didn't even knew what they meant. I had to Google them, and
Hmm.
whenever we got assigned like these papers for discussion, I didn't understand half of the things that they were saying in these papers, and I had to wait until like the our research mentor like uh, explained it in our discussions and watered it down for us. So I was like, oh wait, that meant that, like this meant that, and even though I consider myself fully bilingual, I also am aware that I was raised in a certain way and I talk in a certain way, and something as simple or trivial as basic communication, like for me that fed a lot. It used to feed a lot into my capabilities as a scholar, but now it doesn't. Like I embrace that now, and I feel that we need to find and ways to come to term with things that feed into our imposter syndrome, because at the end of the day, the biggest takeaways from my paper that everybody that read it told me was like, hey, like this is really easy to read, like this is not filled with lexical mumbo jumbo. We appreciate the accessibility of your paper.
I love that so much because I remember when we published our papers from Hopkins and we were kind of sharing them amongst each other just for what's it called? Like when you review them and like punctuation type of stuff, just reviewing the
Yeah,
concepts,
we were just peer
like
reviewing.
peer reviewing. When we're doing the peer reviewing, I remember everybody had a significantly longer paper than me and they had much bigger words and so much more to say. But then mine was pretty straight to the point. What I don't like specifically about art history research is that there's so much mumbo jumbo, there's so many big words, there's so many unnecessary, like you're trying to hit a word count, to make it sound smarter, to make it more inaccessible. It is so hard to read some of these, and I wanted to produce something that is not only accessible to people, but that is straight to the point, and that when up and coming academics see this, they will understand it the first or second time around and not, oh my God, I have to Google half the terms in this. And after you do Google it and you realize what they're trying to say, it could have been said so much more simpler. So I just love that that was the main takeaway from yours, because that was the similar takeaway with mine. I shared it with a couple people that were close to me who weren't even art history people. Maybe some didn't even go to college. And I wrote it for someone actually. It was about someone who didn't go to school, and she loved the reading, she loved the presentation. And I was glad that people could just read at a very lighthearted level and love it and resonate with it, which I think is really important. So, to wrap this up, I think it's important to cultivate self awareness, practice self compassion, and seek support when you need it from fellow peers and mentors. It will make it a lot easier to navigate these intimidating academic spaces with greater confidence and resilience, because that's what it's about when you get somewhere and it's unfamiliar territory. You're all deserving and capable of the successes and the things that you've achieved thus far. Don't let a room with shiny things intimidate you, because you were chosen to be in that room for a reason. You were chosen to present somewhere. You're accepted into a school because they want to see what you have to produce. They want you to represent them, and that is so important. And especially after you do achieve things, don't be scared to put on your resume to talk about it. Like, oh yeah, I went to the Hopkins University. No, I went to the Hopkins University and it was a great experience. I presented all these conferences, and it gave me more leverage when it comes to applying to internships and jobs post grad. I did something and I'm proud. They believed in me, so that's why I got in. Just speak about your successes with a lot more confidence and stand up a little bit straighter, because it shows so much more about you and what you have to bring to the table. Do you have any closing thoughts, Alejandro?
I mean, if you're in a certain position right now, that means that you earned it, and you're more than capable of building up from that point onwards.
Exactly.
So my final thoughts are like, you got this. You can keep going, and you will get there.
Exactly. It was lovely to host you today, Alejandro, and I just want to remind everybody to keep chasing a dream, and we'll catch you next time. And hopefully, next time with Alejandro is in a studio in the States, and oh my gosh, there's so much more to come. But see you guys.
We did this.